Hi, this is Rahman Sheikh. Welcome to Fortnightly Railway Transportation Systems Podcast. I am the host and railway systems specialist working in this industry for 24 years and counting. This podcast is primarily focused on railway experts who have vast amount of experience and contributed greatly to this amazing industry. This is not a technical seminar but focuses on feel good stories, individual journeys, their success and failures, motivating younger generation to kickstart their career in railways and creating a sense of pride for the railway people who devoted their lives on the most environment friendly public transportation. Our guest for this fortnight is Howard Collins, Chief Operations Officer, Greater Sydney at Transport for New South Wales. In addition to his role as COO, Howard is on boards of Sydney Metro, Australasian Railway Association, TrackSAFE Foundation, and New South Wales Transport Heritage. Howard is an MBA graduate from University of Westminster. He started his professional career over 45 years ago. Howard has been in key roles including Chief Operating Officer at London Underground, Chief Executive at Sydney Trains, and Member Board of Directors at Australian Railway Association. He is known within the industry for his high skills in operations management, disaster recovery, operational planning, employee relations, business transformation, management, and project portfolio management, including commissioning and opening new railways and placemaking. Hi, Howard. Welcome to Railway Transportation Systems Podcast. Thank you for joining and agreeing to spend some time sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm absolutely delighted to be invited to what is a great series of podcasts. So I know I've got some tough questions ahead, but I'm really here to sort of understand what people want to hear from me, but also to really share what has been a long but fantastic journey on public transport.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. I strongly believe that people would love to hear you. You're very famous in the transport industry, not just New South Wales, but across different continents. Before we start asking you some nice questions where we can take and learn from you, I would like to ask you to tell us about your professional transport industry journey so far.
Well, it's a long railway journey. It's almost like the Indian Pacific in terms it's very long. So I try and keep this to a short sort of précis because I want people to remain on the call and not be bored by me going on and on about what I've done over the 45 years. But I'll just give you a bit of a clue. I, as a young child, was obsessed with anything on wheels. Planes, trains, automobiles. And one thing I think the first lesson I've learned is if you want to pursue that passion, make sure your career is involved in that passion. And from day one, when I started with London Transport, leaving school all those years ago, it was about that passion. And time has flown by. I advise people that if there's a phenomenon that people don't know, that as you get older, time goes faster. In that journey, I've done most jobs as an operational trainee, most operational jobs. I've had the excitement of working with mega projects in the Olympics, all sorts of stuff that I could talk about. But the one ingredient, whilst I love all the technical things and, new signalling systems and making sure people knew that the first automated train in the world was on the Victoria line, I think the most common and consistent thing that I enjoyed the most is working with people.
What a bright and successful journey so far. I think it's pretty short, and I will deep dive more into your professional career and personal career as well. So when I actually started doing some bit of investigation on Howard Collins, that's yourself, I really liked your post-nominals. OBE. I know many people might knew about it, but for the people who don't know what OBE is, that you are a recipient of Officer of the Order of British Empire in recognition to your success as a lead director for London Underground and London Rail for 2012 Olympic Games and for the services for public transport. What a great feat. How do you feel about that, Howard? And how do you manage success?
Well, I think the one thing we all have to learn is to be humble in our success. And I'm humbled by the fact that I was honoured with this Officer of the Order of the British Empire I recognise that actually my success has been built on a team effort, and that somehow, there are many others around me who helped me achieve the success that we got out of the Olympic Games, and it was a big team effort. And also the fact that, I had been in London Underground and worked pretty solidly for that 36 years before I saw the light of coming to Australia. But I think the biggest, proudest person was my mum. I think all of us in that group of people who've been honoured in some way, you have to make sure you treat it with respect. I don't expect anyone to treat me differently because of it. I just think it's a bit of a recognition. And I really genuinely believe there are many, many others out there who have the same recognition and support. And I'm representing them as on their behalf.
Well, that idea and concept of managing success is really astonishing. And hearing so far, I imagine, what does a typical day in life of a chief operations officer for Greater Sydney look like?
Yeah, well, let me tell you about that, because it is. I always tell people I spring out of bed early in the morning. Well, at my age, you have the theory of doing that, and then there's the practice of a few creaking bones. But I'm an early bird. I think in the transport world, most of us who've worked shift work, most of us who have done, night duties, commissioning, signalling and doing all stuff, we're up with the lark. And that's my daily routine, whether it's Monday or Saturday or Sunday. My first job of the day is I do have to grab that phone and see what's happened overnight, understand, because I brief out the ministers with a personal text every morning, both the roads minister, now I look after roads, and the Minister for Public Transport, just to say it's all calm or there's an issue. I even give them a bit of a heads up of what the weather is going to be like in the Sydney Basin, just to give people a sense that the one person who's overarching, looking out for them to make sure it's okay, that's what I do. They used to call my train in the morning, which I used to catch on a regular basis, the 6:05 from Woolooware, the Chief Executive's Express. But I'm a bit of a man of routine, so I like to be in the office by 7. Every day is different, and there's no exceptions, because when you're moving so many people and parts, whether that's bus, ferry, rail, things change quickly. And one of my roles is to ensure that through either media, communication, that everyone understands what's happening. And if something goes wrong, we have a special team, a COO, incident management team is set up to manage that. But that's the day job. I also, as you read out, I also love getting involved in the future of railways. I love the fact that I'm now involved with one of the greatest projects, I think, in Australia, if not the world, the Sydney Metro. I love also to get involved with strategically looking at rail and how we can build that to, really make places like Sydney a global public transport organisation and city. So I mix between immediacy of life and also do some thinking. But when you've been in the business 45 years, sometimes you see things which were glimmers in people's eyes of strategies, like the Jubilee line in the 1970s, which was called the Fleet line, by the way, actually being built. And the same with Sydney Metro. I remember reading this article in 2006. It had a picture of a Central Line train, which was blanked out, and they put, Sydney on it. It was just a pipe dream. It's now there and being built. That's what's fantastic. That's one advantage of getting old. You see things really happening which are changing the generation of people's lives. And that's great to see.
That's pretty active, occupied. You have a full plate every day.
Yes, I also enjoy, I think one of the things everyone, my advice is you do need to switch off a bit, because otherwise, it's a 24/7. So I enjoy, taking a break. I love walking and getting out and about and getting some fresh air in. And I have a crusade. If I can do 10,000 steps a day, that's my objective. For an old man, that's not too bad. And the other thing is, I'm always positive. I'm enthusiastic about everything. Occasionally, enthusiasm can be tempered by a slight disappointment, but you've got to, if you're enthusiastic, you can bring your team with you. If you are miserable and think things are not going to happen, then people believe it. So energy, enthusiasm, getting on with the job and spending some time out there is really part of my daily routine.
I agree, I concur. Howard, you oversee Greater Sydney's expansive multimodal transport network, a public transport and road system that has a capacity of more than 800 million customer trips every year. So, what is the most challenging aspects of your role?
Well, I suppose the first thing I'd like to say, and there may be a few railway listeners on the podcast today, is if you cut me through, you'll find railways written in my bones. But I would say I've been pleasantly surprised that at my fair age 2 years ago, I've discovered that the journey is about multimodal, and railway was fantastic, and most of my career I've spent in it. It is really now about connecting ourselves up with all those different journeys, particularly now with the last mile connections and with, the sort of technologies out there that we've got in our fingertips. So the one thing I have learned is that joining them all together and getting bus, rail, light rail, ferries, all sharing that experience is so important. And one of my crusades before I finally hang up my transport boots is to create that sense of connectivity with all modes. And we don't sit in isolation. We might produce a great railway service, but if the bus doesn't connect with the rail system, if we don't build a new transport management centre which is as good as a rock, I think we've lost out. So I feel like I'm bringing all these components together, and with a great team, I'm starting to see some of the success. But there's more to be done and a lot more work. It's by no means near complete.
Yeah, it looks pretty intense. So, when faced with such challenging and stressful situation, how do you keep your emotions in check?
I think sometimes we're born with calmness. My wife, who's a maternity nurse, or retired now, used to tell me that when the baby arrives in the world, you can see whether they're people who are not stressed but are affected, and those are others are calm. I think I was blessed by the fact that I'm absolutely calm by nature. I've been in some very, very stressful situations, from big rail incidents to major events where things aren't going according to plan. You have to, measure twice, cut once, give that calmness around the room. Like a captain of the ship, you can't be jumping off first. You've got to stay the course and be there. And also, you've got to have a sense of humility and accept sometimes that some of my best learning exercises, what I can share with you today, is when things didn't go according to a perfect plan, and that there were out of, not that people shy away from the word failure, but out of things which didn't go well, you learn the most, and then you can come back the next time. Some of my experience, only happens once in 45 years or twice. And that's the advantage, I think, of staying the course in one industry, is you can share that experience, not tell old war stories and bore people's senses of my time when I was on the tube, but really do give people advice about how we can get right this time.
Really noteworthy, Howard. Thank you. That was really something to take away. Hearing to your story, I just think having a great team around you is very important. So when it comes to recruiting and hiring new team members, what are the key things you look for to ensure you find the right person in the right role?
Great question. I think all of us as leaders, the one thing we all have to understand is you can't do this alone. You actually are totally dependent on the team that are supporting you and working around you. And I think one of the things I again have learned from one of my bosses, a great guy, and I was part of his team and we were dealing with some challenging issues. I learned a lot from him about, treating people with respect, working together, working extremely hard, but giving people recognition for how they've done. It is easy in the heat of the moment to take the credit and accept the accolades from the boss and move on, rather than putting people forward and saying to people, actually, my team delivered this, and Sam or Joe, Fred or Samantha, they were part of it. And I have, I think, learnt about how you can surround yourself with good people. One other thing I'd say is you can't keep all these good people forever. You have to actually be a journey for them, that they learn a lot from the teamwork and the experiences they've had, and then you hopefully launch them further so that one day they will be your boss. And I have been on that journey. I I remember Andy Byford coming in as a trainee into my temporary accommodation on South Kensington platform, executive trainee, he'd been a good graduate. And even at that moment, I thought in a few years' time, he's going to be my boss, or he's going to be, the boss of Transport for London that he is now. And those people take a journey and you can just help them move along in the organisation.
What a leader. I can see a leader in you, and no doubt why people love to work with you, Howard. And you have given such vital and critical points. Going forward, please, can you share an experience in which you successfully taught a difficult principle or concept, and how were you able to be successful in that?
Gosh, there are so many I could think of in terms of, situations where it almost seemed impossible, but we got there in the end. And I think giving you a little bit of not a technical flavour, but I know a lot of your listeners will be from industry, and a lot of people, I would say, really helped us along the way. We were facing on the Jubilee Line extension a project, probably a bit like Crossrail, but not probably as late or as over Spencer's Crossrail or Elizabeth Line. We were facing the dilemma of the Jubilee Line being late and the technology not working. And the signalling system wasn't going to be commissioned for the opening. And I remember there was a great colleague of mine in France, Gerard Churchill. He was the boss of the new Line 13 metro line. We had a conversation where I said, look, what I'm planning to do is run an underground line with screen doors, but have manually driven trains. And he looked at me very seriously and he said, Howard, this is not possible. No one has done this. Why do you think this can work? And then I said to him, well, if you know the tube and the Northern Line, the driver has to stop within a couple of feet. Otherwise, the back of the train or the front of the train is in the tunnel. I think with some practice, we can get Jubilee Line drivers with the new extension driving and stopping and aligning within a half a metre of the platform. We tried everything. We tried overhead beams, marker boards, and being someone who used to drive the Jubilee Line trains, and I kept my driving licence till 2013 when I left, I would drive with the drivers and we tried different things, and eventually we got it so that we could move forward and open the line with a driver driving the train, lining up with those screen doors and it working. And for the first few years, that's how the Jubilee Line worked until the new Thales signalling system came on board. What seemed impossible for most people in the industry was achievable, thanks to some great work done by some of my operational colleagues, people in the rolling stock world and the signalling world who helped us achieve that. And that meant the pressure was on. We had to open that line before the millennium, 2000, year 2000, and we got the final station open on the 15th of December or 16th of December, 1999. It was a close call, but we did it.
Incredible. When I hear this story from you, it's like a open innovation. So generally, when we talk about innovation, it's like we set up a R&D firm and only people do research there and innovate something in the R&D department. But this idea of yours comes under open innovation, and it actually worked.
Yeah, I think a lot of my time, what do people ask me to do? Quite often, there's a very difficult problem somehow has happened, whether that's sometimes negotiations with unions or a project running late or an Olympic challenge, trying to get everyone on public transport. That's what I enjoy the most. I like fixing things. And when I'm outside of work, I'm in my garage fixing stuff. Most people throw it in the bin. I think, with a bit of solder and a little bit of intuition, and a few bits of scrap metal, I can get this thing working again. And my wife calls me Mr. Fixer because she gives me a broken thing and I try and fix it. Sometimes it has to go in the bin because I failed dismally, but most times I reckon I can get the thing working again. And that's what I love. You're in a team, you're facing adversity, it's impossible, but the pride you have, we had, when getting things done, getting the underground working after the London bombings, getting the Jubilee Line opening, getting the new trains commissioned on the Sydney Trains network, those wonderful Waratahs, all part of that success story that you can feel you've done something which is more than just, a tick in the box.
Correct. Agree. These tips will be an aid to all my listeners, definitely. And when you go back to the leadership question, there are many types of leadership styles, from authoritarian to transformational, delegative, participative, etc. So, which one of those you use?
Well, and let me start off by saying you have to create a followership. You can't lead by shouting at people, telling them to do stuff and issuing commands. Those days of command and control, which I walked into in 1977, where a lot of ex-military people thought the louder they shouted at you, the better you do your job, they're gone. You have to create a sense of well-being amongst the team that they will follow you. I did say I had a great boss once, John Self. I'll name him. I'll embarrass him. We would, as a team of 12, jumped over and off the cliff if John had said, this is what we're going to do, because he created that sense of loyalty. If I could do a little bit of what John did, that would make me feel proud that I'm getting the team to follow me. I tend to be collaborative. I can, when needed, be pretty firm and say, this is the way we're going. We have to make a decision. I'm not impatient, but I love getting stuff done. I don't like too much bureaucracy and paperwork and process. Everyone knows that, so they try and keep things pretty short. But I do think my leadership style is creating that sense of trust, responsibility, followership, being very genuine, having humility when you get things wrong, opening up a little bit of your own self. The vulnerability of a human being is important. I can't walk on water. I'm very embarrassed by what you say sometimes in terms of my achievements. I am actually wanting to make sure people understand I'm a human being like anyone else. And together as human beings, I did say you've got the hardware, you've got the software. We are the warmware. They're a little bit more volatile than the hardware or the software, but together we create a huge amount of, success by working as a team.
You're gifted, Howard, and I think the people who work under you are really truly blessed. I really think, and you spoke about decisions in that talk as well. So when talking about decision making, what are the most difficult decisions to make?
I'll talk something personal in my life. Decision about leaving London Underground and coming to Australia. I had been a true veteran of London transport. My boss at the time, Mike Brown, said, I never, ever thought you would leave, Howard. You would be there, to the end of time as a London Transport and a London Underground employee. But I just saw an opportunity to come to an amazing country like Australia where, at the time we'd done the London Olympics in 2012. We'd celebrated 150 years of London Underground. I'd even managed to persuade everybody to run a steam train on the Underground with my great friend Peter Hendy, who supported me all the way, now Sir Peter. So I felt I'd been in the job 5 years as a COO, but I wanted to really be the boss as the chief executive, to really think I could take that package forward. And I saw Sydney Trains and the new government, they came knocking on my door, and I thought, this is a great opportunity. And I've never regretted it. It is 9 years today that I started, July the 1st, 2013, when I met Gladys Berejiklian and we did our first press conference. And I do look at Sydney Trains now and think I'm very, very proud of what we have achieved, and the staff, every one of them, and what the staff have done in Sydney Trains. And I think that's the toughest decision I made. My wife is very supportive. I left my then 18-year-old son to go off to university, but I've loved every moment of it. And I've told people there is a strategy called the 2056 strategy. I've said, you never know, I might still be here then. I'll be 97 years old. But I might be still running, on the railway somewhere.
I wish. I want to see you there. What an amazing decision. I really love the decision you made. We are truly blessed. We are truly happy to see you in Australia. It's not just about transportation industry or not just about professionally what you have done here in Australia, but I did a bit of more research, and I actually found that this is your 9th year with Venice CEO Sleep Out, and you have raised almost $2.7 million for homelessness.
Not me personally. I think 400 other people raise most of that money because they work in the private sector. I would thank every one of those people who contributed to my small amount. But yeah, if I could leap in and tell you about that, look, I think a lot of people who work in the transport industry, whether you're in, the Railway Children Fund, which I was involved with in the UK, you see the desperate situation that people get themselves into, and transport is a place people you finally end up. They literally sleep under the arches of the railway worldwide or in public spaces. And there was no exception, whether you're in London or Sydney, I saw people like that. And one of my great colleagues, Nev Nichols, Nev is a great signalling engineer as well, by the way. Yeah. Learned his trade in British Rail, but he's been out here many years, a true gentleman. He and Rob Mason, another colleague of mine, said, you've got to do this sleep out. And I thought, that's going to be difficult because, I don't really like sleeping out in the cold. I have been inspired by the work that Vincent de Paul, Vinnies as we call it, have done. And last week, along with some new colleagues who have courage to come along, we did an amazing thing where we stepped into not even shoes, because many of these people don't have shoes, stepped into their lives just for a day, just for an evening, at White Bay, which is one of the coldest places in Sydney, and experienced that. And I think it just gets me thinking, we just, as a country, a very wealthy country, need to do more for these people. And this year's theme wasn't about hardened homeless people who've been there for years. It was really about you and I, who could have been on that journey where, for some reason, you lost your job, the rent, you couldn't pay your rent. People are on the edge who paid. There was a young lady, she's a pensioner, she told us about, she'd worked all her life, but she was the edge of becoming homeless because of the circumstances she faced. That's why we need to make a difference. And if I can do more, and anyone else can do more to support this organisation, Vinnies, we should hit $3 million for New South Wales, hopefully with a few more contributions. It's never too late. I'm just very proud of working with the team and thanking my colleagues for getting me on that journey.
Yeah, that's a really emotional story, Howard. So when I look into the title, Vinnies CEO Sleep Out. So is there any non-CEO, people like me, how can we contribute?
Well, I think initially the start of was to get the big bosses, the Pommy Rail King, as they used to call me, down there, along with the CEOs of Telstra and Optus and everyone else. But it has evolved over time. So leaders, executive directors, chief operating officers, leaders of organisation are most welcome. And if you can't do the sleep out, there are many other things from a voluntary point of view. I think the headline is it's trying to make sure that it is those people who can influence the outcome of people. So I was joined this time by Daniela Fontana, former Chief Executive of State Transit Authority, Rachel Simpson, who's an Executive Director in our team, Trudy Mayers, who's the Deputy Secretary. So it's not a bunch of chief executives, with their limousines outside. It was a great group of people, and, we'd welcome more people joining us. Look out for the 2023. I don't know where it's going to be this year, but if people who are senior managers who are involved in that, we welcome people and just have a chat with Vinnies and find out whether you can join the team. If you can't join the team, spend the night in your garage or out the back garden somewhere, because when we had the COVID, that's what I did. I went in my garage for the night.
Yeah, we will do it. Sure, Howard. When you talk about this COVID, I was just thinking in my head, pre-COVID and post-COVID, the way we work has drastically changed. COVID has brought so many new things into our lives, and many people are going through really tough times. So in such scenarios, how do you actually motivate your team?
Yes, it has been, and everyone, a massive gig. I think the benefit, and we are very fortunate that we were one of those services which needed to continue and keep operating in the middle of COVID. Even when we only had 250,000 people using the railway and the public transport, where normally had 2.5 million a day, we had to keep going, and that kept people in employment. One of the things I kept saying is, let's run the full service, Let's keep everybody busy. Even if there's only one person on your bus, let's keep them busy. Keep that, because that might be that one nurse which saves someone's life. It might be a doctor, or it might be someone who's doing a great job for the police. So we've done that, and we were fortunate. Many other businesses weren't so fortunate. Their trade went, and despite support from government, there are many people who have lost their jobs and ended up having to change their whole careers. We had Qantas pilots, 380 pilots driving buses. We had very senior people in the catering industry, acting as cleaners. So the humility of those people and managing to sort of keep their sense of mental health going was really important. But I think we recognise there's this overused word, the new state of normal. In transport, our challenge is getting people back on public transport.
Yep.
But also it's about looking after our people, because it's been tough, and a lot of the mentality in the past about operations was just suck it up, get on with life. But we do need to look after people. How have we done that? I think there's a couple of things in my job in TrackSAFE, in working with Lifeline, working with mental health, particularly for our frontline employees, I think is important, in offering training, guidance. And then the other big one, which you may have heard of, Are You OK? And Rail Are You OK Day, which we support. This is an opportunity for colleague to colleague, peer-to-peer discussion, which might feel a bit stilted when you start asking, Howard, are you okay? Yeah. And, I'm all right, mate. No, don't worry about it. But you really do need to offer that, because sometimes just that conversation alone will help people on their journey recovering from some quite tough mental health conditions. So we must recognise that. And the old days where, railway people just used to think that was just for people who weren't up to the job. We've got to support people. And I'd say, even as a big boss, you all need support. It gets you through some tough times.
Yeah, I concur. That's a really sparkling idea, Howard. When we talk about these jobs and resources, etc., especially within our transport industry, with this current scarce resource market, particularly across our transport sector, what things do you think transport can do to build a robust talent pipeline within the organization?
This is the biggest crisis we are facing in the industry. And if I could use this podcast to tell my story, is that we need to get more people on board. I often say, and I'll be, maybe it's slightly impertinent for me to say, we don't need more jobs. We need more people to fill the jobs that we have, whether that's more bus drivers at the basic level, but more signalling, testing, commissioning. We are in Australia spending a huge amount of money on infrastructure, billions, $120 billion if you look at each of the states. And New South Wales is leading the way, obviously spending the most money. But we can't deliver this if we don't have good people. And there are two ways to do this. One is to capture those people whose parents are asking, saying to their kids, we want you to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer. With great respect, we do need doctors, dentists, and lawyers. But I want some of the parents out there to realise a really highly successful career as an engineer, as a project manager, who can step back in 20 years' time and said, I was involved in building that station or that line or that project, I think is greater often than many other things that people think are the traditional successful careers. And I would encourage that primary school to secondary school, so we get good Australian people. In the meantime, though, that's going to take 5-10 years. In the meantime, we need to bring on more people. And I know I'm an import from another country, and there are a few other great people amongst us here today who've come from other global countries around the world. Have you looked at the census recently, which has just been released? A third of us weren't born here in many ways. We've got over half of us have parents who were born from other countries. We are a great global opportunity. I think we need to invite more people from around the world, wherever they're from, whatever diversity and creed. We need those people to come and join us, along with, the next generation of our homegrown Aussie talent. And if we don't do that, if we don't open up those doors within the next few months, we will lose out, because the projects will slow, programs will get stuck, because we might be worrying about have we got enough steel, enough concrete, and the price of reinforcing bar, but actually the most important thing is getting the people with the talents to deliver this stuff.
I agree. I'm
End
one of
of sermon, but I'm passionate about this, and I think if I'm going to hand over some of this to you youngsters out there, particularly yourself.
Thank you.
I need to know there's a pipeline of people coming through.
Correct. I'm one of those, Howard, a blessed, happy immigrant. I moved from India to UK and from UK to here. And thank you for this initiate. It helps a wider community. But my concurrent question, my next question is also in regards to this. How do we actually communicate it to the schools? Because you talked about schools. How do we go there? Are we doing anything there?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think it is something we really do need to think about carefully. What inspired you or me at school? What really, when I sit and think about the people, I had an Australian geography teacher. His name was Bailey. He was a former master mariner, and he brought to life the sense of what's happening out in the world by his storytelling. Where he was in the port of Japan, or whether he was in delivering wood in Perth, Jarrah wood for the sleepers of the underground, which I want Australians to understand. The underground is built on Australian wood, because most of those old sleepers deep underground are made out of Jarrah wood from Australia. Those stories brought to life a 13-year-old who wasn't sure what he wanted to do. And I think we have got to get into the schools, not only great teachers, but people who can tell that story of what it is. And I do feel the younger generation has much more social conscience than maybe the red-braced world of the 1980s. You remember the guys in their Porsches and their red braces, and I think people are much more concerned about the environment, much more concerned about sustainability, much more concerned about having a career which means something rather than just a dollar check every month. And I do think there is a window of opportunity for us in the transport industry, and to put up examples. The ARA has a Y Lab, a youth group who advises and helps us. 20, 30 of those people are the leaders of transport of the future. We just need to give those opportunities to people, and many, many things we can do. And I do think it starts off with not so much people like me going into schools but younger people who've made their journey and transition to convince others to come and join them in that transport world.
Brilliant. What an answer, Howard. And could you please give me one piece of advice to our listeners today?
Oh, that is such a hard question. One piece of advice. My father gave me one piece of advice, was measure twice and cut once. I think that's a good piece of advice. If you're going to do something, just double check you're doing it right before you get the saw out and cut the wood. And I think I have sometimes, because I'm a spontaneous person, I want to go into the action mode first. It is, with some of my colleagues and my team, it is worth just taking a breath, thinking about what you're doing, and then making a decision. So that's my advice to everybody today. I would also say one final thing. I know you asked me one, but I'll give you two for the price of one. Buy one and get one free. That's what I say. I would say wake up every day thinking you're going to make a difference, and be positive about it, because it's infectious. It gets other people motivated. And never forget the power of your own leadership. Even if you're a supervisor managing a small group of people, you will influence them by being honest, supportive, enthusiastic, getting out there, being on the front line, communicating with people. Never walk by anyone of your staff without recognising them for what they're doing. Whether they're the cleaner, the customer service assistant at Town Hall platform, give them the time to just say hi and recognise them for what they're doing. That's my last piece of advice I can give today.
Brilliant. We would definitely take that idea, Howard. And lastly, before I let you go, I hear you can drive a train. Did you want to become a train driver? And is it likely we will see you in a driver's cab anytime soon?
I'll give my secrets away now. When in London Underground, when you join as a trainee, as I did, you had to go through every single grade and qualify. So I did that early in my career. And then when I became an area manager on a 2-year stream, I did driving, and I drove trains. And then I found that when you're talking to drivers, the respect you get is if you can demonstrate your skills, and then they can have a break from what is a challenging job, certainly on the underground. So I've kept that. And a good friend of mine, Winston Ince, he's now living in Barbados. God bless him, Winston. He taught me how to drive. I used to go out on the Sunday, and he helped me, manage the skills of stopping right on within a centimetre of the stopping mark. I learn a lot from people like him, and it's still good. And I am quite keen at some stage when I retire. That's why I've got a little bit of my heritage. I'm keen to encourage people to recognise the history of this place and bring the heritage to the community. And one day, maybe in a few years' time, you'll see some old grey-haired chap on the front of a steam locomotive, or shoveling the coal, or maybe even just doing menial tasks. That'll be my new career in a few years' time.
Well, nice one. Thank you, Howard. From bottom of my heart, I really appreciate taking time out from your busy schedule and sharing your insights with us.
Well, thank you so much. You've been a fantastic interviewer. I think you've put me under the pump when it comes to questions, and I do appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening, because you made an old man quite happy.
Thank you, Howard. I believe everyone listening to this podcast has got something to take away from today's discussion. If you like this podcast, please listen, follow, and share this podcast within your network. If you believe we should be sharing your story, or someone within your network, there is a railway leader who should be here sharing his or her contribution to this industry, contact me on railwaytransportationsystems@gmail.com. Thank you for your time today. See you next fortnight. Until then, stay safe and take care of yourself.